All right, so let's dive into this whole idea of criticism being a secret career weapon, huh? This article you sent over, well, the title's pretty bold. Handling criticism at work is easy, actually. Seriously.
Yeah, it definitely grabs your attention, doesn't it? I mean, I think it's a little more nuanced than just easy, but this idea of weaponizing criticism,
Hmm.
that's pretty interesting. It's like, how can we use something most people hate to actually get ahead?
Okay, so we're not talking about like enjoying it when your boss calls you out, right? It's more about finding a way to actually benefit from those moments.
Exactly. It's about strategy.
Okay, I can get behind that. But how do we even begin to see those ouch moments as something, positive? Where do we start?
Reframing. It's all about reframing. See,
Yeah.
instead of thinking of it as a personal attack, think of criticism like a high value tool,
Yeah.
like a diagnostic tool. You wouldn't ignore the check engine light in your car, right?
Right.
Criticism is like that. It's giving you data, showing you where you can optimize your performance.
I like that. That analogy makes it a lot less, well, personal feeling. But it's one thing to say, don't take it personally, and another to actually use it to, level up. How do we bridge that gap?
Thinking about your own upgrade moments can really help. Think back to a time when you got tough feedback, but looking back, it actually pushed you to a new level. How'd you approach it then? What happened?
Now that you mention it, I had this boss early in my career, and he was brutally honest about my writing, like really harsh at the time. But you know what? He taught me to be so much more concise, to think about my audience in a different way. Skills I use every single day now.
There you go.
Yeah.
And when you actually recognize those past upgrades, it's like you're training yourself to see the value in feedback, even when it's tough. It's not about ego anymore. It's about, okay, what can I learn from this to get even better?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like building up that mental muscle to turn those negative experiences into like fuel for growth, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. But what about when the feedback itself just isn't delivered well? Like the article mentioned this feedback sandwich technique, right?
Yeah, it did. And, while I think it's coming from a good place, sometimes the feedback sandwich can actually do more harm than good.
Oh, really? Interesting. I always hear it's like the gold standard. What's the problem with it?
Well, it can muddy the water a bit. Sometimes it even comes across as kind of insincere. Like, think about it. If you had to deliver bad news, would you sandwich it between two compliments?
Probably not, no.
Right. It's about being direct but respectful.
Okay, that's a good point. So what's the alternative? Just rip the Band-Aid off and hope for the best?
Not quite. There are definitely better ways to give constructive criticism. One thing the article talked about was being specific, like focusing on the behavior. So instead of saying, your communication needs work, which is kind of vague and not that helpful,
Right.
you could say something like, hey, I noticed in that meeting you interrupted your colleague a few times, and it made it hard for them to fully share their ideas.
Ah, okay. So you're giving concrete examples and showing how that behavior actually impacted things. That feels a lot more constructive
Right.
than just a general critique.
Exactly. And when you frame it as an observation rather than an accusation, it helps the other person be more open to hearing it too. It's not about attacking them, it's about working together to find solutions.
That makes a lot of sense. But let's be real. Even with the best delivery, criticism can sting a little bit, especially for those of us who, are used to hitting it out of the park. So how does this whole growth mindset thing play into handling those emotions well?
That's where emotional intelligence comes in. It's completely natural to feel a little defensive at first. The key is recognizing those feelings and choosing how you respond. Instead of instantly firing back, take a breath and then ask clarifying questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And when you do that, when you choose to engage with the feedback, instead of just reacting emotionally, that right there, that's a huge step towards that growth mindset.
Because it's not about like never feeling defensive. It's about what we do with those feelings, right?
Exactly. With a growth mindset, you understand that setbacks, they're just part of the journey. Even so-called negative feedback, it's all just information. And you can either let it hold you back or you can use it to push yourself forward.
It's like that saying, criticism is like unsolicited advice.
We don't like that.
You don't have to take it, but you should at least listen to it. Kind of the same idea, right?
Totally. Because it really highlights the fact that we have a choice. We get to decide what we do with that information. And when you have that growth mindset, you're more likely to see the opportunity,
Yeah.
even when it seems like an obstacle.
It's funny because when I think about the times I've grown the most in my career, it's usually been because of some kind of challenge or criticism. Like, remember that project I had to completely redo at the last minute?
Oh, yeah.
Brutal. But I had to learn all these new skills so quickly, and now I'm way more adaptable because of it.
Boom. See? You leaned into that discomfort, you were open to learning, and look at you now, a whole new skill set. Growth mindset in action.
That's right. Okay, so I'm convinced growth mindset it is.
Right.
But let's talk about that, what was it, 1%. The article mentioned that sometimes that criticism isn't coming from a good place, like it's just toxic.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that situation?
Trust your gut.
Yeah.
Seriously. If something feels off about the way feedback is being given, it probably is. Pay attention to the language. Are they being specific? Like focusing on your behaviors? Or is it vague and personal?
So, like, you missed that deadline versus you're always dropping the ball.
Exactly. One is just stating a fact, the other one, total personal attack. And notice if the criticism always seems to happen in front of other people, or if you're always being singled out. That's not okay.
Okay, so what do you do if you're in that situation? Do you just, like, grin and bear it? Or is there a way to actually address it without making it worse?
You never have to just accept bad behavior. One thing you can try is to just address it directly with that person. Calmly and directly, but maybe in private. Like, hey, I want to make sure I'm understanding your feedback. Can you maybe give me a specific example of what you mean by, and then just fill in the blank, whatever that vague or personal comment was.
So you're basically calling them out, but in a way that's like, okay, put your money where your mouth is, back it up, and if they can't, well, it shows you what their feedback is really about.
Exactly. And if it keeps happening, or if you're just not comfortable having that conversation one-on-one, that's when you might need to loop in someone else, like HR or a mentor.
Makes sense. Someone who can kind of mediate and just keep things professional. But ultimately, it sounds like a lot of this comes down to shifting our own perspective. We can't control what other people say and do, but we can control how we choose to react to it.
That's so important. And when you realize that, when you realize you have that power, it can be incredibly empowering. Criticism stops feeling like this scary thing, and it starts to feel more like, okay, this is an opportunity.
Yeah. It's like that quote, the obstacle is the way. It's not about pretending it doesn't hurt. It's about realizing that even in those tough moments, there's something valuable there. We just have to be open to seeing it.
Yes. And when you consistently choose to learn and grow from criticism, you're not just building resilience, you're building a real advantage in your career.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, not everyone's willing to do that work.
It's true. It takes guts to really open yourself up to criticism, especially when it's about something you care about. But the payoff, totally worth it.
100%. And, who knows, maybe with a little practice, handling criticism might even start to feel, dare I say it, easy.
Oh, okay, maybe not easy, but definitely a superpower. So let's say we're ready to really own this whole criticism as a superpower thing. Are there tactics we can use right in the moment to get the most out of it, even if the delivery's kind of rough?
For sure. One thing that can really help is to approach it almost like a detective, like you're gathering clues.
Okay.
Instead of getting defensive, try asking yourself, what are they actually trying to tell me? What's the main message here?
Yeah, cut through the noise, get to the signal.
Exactly. And sometimes you have to really dig for it. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Can you give me a specific example of what I could do differently next time?
Oh, I like that. Because then they have to put up or shut up, right? If they can't give you specifics.
Got it.
It tells you a lot about the feedback itself.
100%. Plus, it shifts the dynamic. It's not a confrontation anymore. It's more collaborative. You're saying, okay, I'm open to this, but I need you to meet me halfway.
I like it. But what about those situations where you've tried all that, you've reframed, you've been open, you might have even brought in someone else like we talked about,
Yeah.
but the criticism just keeps coming, or it just feels really personal? What do you do then?
That's tough, no doubt. And it's important to remember that you always have choices. You always have a choice. And sometimes the healthiest choice, the one that really empowers you, is to create some distance.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that could mean setting boundaries with that person, not engaging as much. Or in some cases, it might even mean looking for opportunities somewhere else.
Wow. So sometimes the best way to weaponize criticism is to just walk away.
Sometimes, yeah, because you don't deserve to be treated badly. You deserve to be in an environment where you feel respected, where you feel valued, even when you're getting feedback.
Yeah, that's a really important point. So to sum all this up for our listeners, criticism, even when it's tough to hear, can be incredibly valuable. but we have to approach it the right way.
Right. We have to reframe how we see it, be aware of our own emotions, and use those practical strategies we talked about. That's how we turn it into that secret weapon, that tool for growth.
It's like the problem isn't the criticism itself, it's how much we resist it. So next time you're facing one of those ouch moments, lean in a little, see what you can learn, and just keep leveling up.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah,
Trust your gut, embrace that growth mindset. You got this.
love it. And on that note, that wraps up another deep dive. Until next time, everyone, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep weaponizing those criticisms.